Beginning our Daf Mesechta Nedarim Daf Samachay, beginning on the top line of the Amud, where the Gemara continues in related discussion with the previous Daf, because we had mentioned a teaching from Moshe Rabbeinu, which related to the halacha of Noilid. He said that Hashem told to Moshe Rabbeinu, he says, "Oh, the people that are looking for you, they're dead, and therefore that was a raya, at least there was an attempt of a raya, to show that there's no problem about Noilid." However, the other mandama says that it was not noilid because it wasn't really dying, it was really regarding Anias. If someone takes a neder prohibiting benefit from his friend, so that he could only be matir in front of that person who he made the subject of the vow, which we'll see in the round exactly what type of vow that actually is. And then the machlekes regarding yesh dvarim shein kin noilid ve'en kin noilid. That we're continuing on the theme of the previous Mishnah, which spoke about noilid, but then the discussion and there's a machlekes whether a neder may be nullified through a matter that it's not noilid, even though it appears to be noilid, and we'll describe exactly what is those cases to see what is the machlekes regarding that case. And then the following Mishnah discusses you could make an opening, meaning to be matir the neder, from something that's written in the Torah. It says, did you know you can violate vafrecha kamoicha, my sister sechicha? And the guy says, no, I didn't know that my neder's going to do this. He says, okay, and then therefore that's not going to be considered as a neder anymore. And also, you open up, you say, did you realize that you're going to have to pay out a big ksuba if you make such a neder and you're going to have to get divorced? Says, I didn't know. Then that also could be matir neder. It's important in terms of concept in today's daf, metatli mishtabli ksuba, that movable items are indebted for the ksuba, and that is the woman could collect her ksuba not only from karka, but also from metatlin. And the halacha mesadin b'chayb, which is primarily in another mesechta, but it's brought up in today's daf, regarding that we organize the needs of the debtor. That is, although he has to pay his creditors, however, we make sure that he has a certain amount of basic needs, food for 12 months, and a certain amount of clothing, and his needs be taken care of before he pays up his creditors. So we begin to go on daf, the top line of the Amud. We had mentioned in the previous daf, Rabbi Eliezer's halacha, the peischem noilid. He says, yes, it's not a problem. You could be matir neder, you could show the charata of something that's going to develop at a later point in time. And he says, I'll bring a raya. It says in the Torah, Mitzrayim, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, go back to Mitzrayim. All the people that want to kill you are dead. Well, death is something that only developed at a later point in time. That obviously was not an error in the neder at the time. And still we see that Hashem was able to use that as a way to be matir his neder. So that's how Gemara continues now on another halacha derived from Shavuos Moshe, where Hashem is being matir the neder. Tanya learn a brayso. If someone is the subject of a vow prohibiting benefit from his friend, now by my Gemara it has on the bottom the discussion regarding if there is an added word over here of what's called bifanov. Someone became mudar ano from his friend in front of him, which the Hagoyes V'Tziyunim in my Gemara says that as we find this gears in the Tais and the Rush, and so too the Ran brings this gears in the Tshuva, and he writes, based on this, it sounds like that if you took a neder not in front of the person, you would permit it even not in front of him. And he says, look over there where he brings the Shita Taisis, and he writes that's the appropriate Shita, even though it's not in agreement with what I wrote in my commentary in Mesechta Nedarim. It says Ran the Tshuva regarding his commentary over here. It says, because I wrote it based on our Girsais. He says, because at that point I didn't yet get the Taisis Mituch, which is one of the Bali Taisis. It says, maybe I'm going to still fix it over there a little bit like commentary. So this is an important element about if the Girs is what was the neder, was it dafka b'fanav, or just if someone is a subject of a neder from his friend. Either way, says the Gemara, ein matir, you cannot be matir that neder, ella b'fanav, only in front of that person. So the Ran brings that there are those who want to say that specifically if this neder was for the purpose of his friend. What do you mean? Like the neder that we're going to bring a raya from in a moment, from Moshe Rabbeinu that made to Yisro. What was the neder Moshe Rabbeinu made to Yisro? He made a neder that he's going to stay with him for his benefit, which was he says he's going to stay, he's not going to leave and pack his bags and leave somewhere. Which is actually, as the Gemara is going to also bring shortly, like the shvur that Tzidkiyahu HaMelech made to Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha, that the oath that he made to Nebuchadnezzar was also for the benefit of Nebuchadnezzar, that he doesn't embarrass him. And those are the types of Nadarim that we're talking about, that you can only matter it before of that other person. But, says the Ran, those opinions want to say, but a neder that you took, which has no tzorich for his chaver, even though it's related to him, then you can matter it even shaloi b'fanav. That's how some want to say. Says the Ran, it's logical to say that this piece would be dependent on the machlekes in the Yerushalmi regarding what's the reason for this halacha that you could not be matter and neder only b'fanav in front of that other person. Because there is an opinion that says over there that the reason is because of busha. What does that mean because of busha? Says the Ran that he's going to be embarrassed of his friend because Lamaisa took a neder for his benefit. Says, I promise I'm going to take care of you. You come to visit me in Florida. I'm going to take you out to dine every night. And now he doesn't want to keep his word. Abach tzad, he has to take care of him. So he wants to be matered for him. Oh, so that reasoning is only applicable if the neder was for his benefit. If then you say he's embarrassed, so that's why we say, you have to be matered in front of him, because that will be a critical feature. But if not, sounds like you mattered even shalei b'fanav, because it's nothing. There's no busha. There was no tzarich for his chaver. It's just related to him. But there's another mandam over there brought that the reasoning is because of chashad, because of suspicion. In other words, his friend is that he's a mudur hana from, is not going to know that he was matter the neder. So when he's going to have benefit from him, he's going to think, what's your husband done neder? What are you having benefit? He thinks he's violating it in the Torah of his neder. Oh, based on that reasoning, even if the neder was not lahanos chavera, you cannot be matrid shaloi b'fanav. Has to be b'fanav because he else is michayshim. He's going to think, this guy is not keeping halacha. When he's matrid neder in front of him, he knows he's matrid neder. Another difference, says the Ran, between these two different opinions is that according to the one that holds that the reason because of chashad, if you notify him, by the way, I want you to know, I went to the Rav, and he was matir my neder, then you'd be matir even shlei b'fanav because there's no machashad. But according to the one that says the reason is because of busha, it doesn't help, even if you notify him. But we want it in front of him because if it's not in front of him, there's no busha. You need it to be there, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm being matir neder. You mean to say what you promised me? You're not going to keep now anymore?" So you only get that element in front of the Baldin. So those are two different interpretations, says around from the Yerushalmi, in regards to this halacha of why ematira no el b'fanav, either because of busha, we want him to be embarrassed now when he's trying to be matrid, or b'nei chashad because or else the guy's going to suspect him that he's violating his neder. Says the Gemara, where do we know this halacha from? So says the Gemara, Rav Nachman, this is the Chsiv pasuk in Shemais. That's why we're bringing this because it relates back to the previous narrative of Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem telling him to go back to Mitzrayim. So what does it say over there? It says, "Vayoyim Hashem el Moshe b'Midyan." Hashem said to Moshe, in Midyan. We know that there's no extra words. We know Moshe Rabbeinu was in Midyan. He tells him, in Midyan, Lech Shuv Mitzrayim, go back to Mitzrayim. Kimesu kol anoshim, like we brought, this was the story we said from the previous daf, because all the people have died. What was Hashem telling him? Omar lo, he said to him, b'Midyan nodalto, in Midyan is where you took the neder, meaning in front of Yisrael. Lech v'heter nederecho b'Midyan. Go and be matir your neder in Midyan in front of Yisrael. That's where you see the halacha that you could only be matir b'fanav and not shalei b'fanav. And again, that's what the Rana said because it was lahanos Yisrael. Like it says in the pasuk, "Vayoyel Moshe," that Moshe took an oath, lo sheves as a ish, to stay with the man, and then he says, "Okay, guys, blabendu, I need the item to be with me. You have no techte." He says, "I need to get the item," and it says that he gave him Tzipor, his daughter, as a wife. Now, ein Allah ela shvua, when it says Vayoyel Moshe, what's what it means Vayoyel Moshe? Vayoyel Moshe means he took an oath. The Chsiv, it says a pasuk in Yecheskel. It says Vayavei oisei ba'Allah. As we're going to actually discuss this narrative right now, Nebuchadnezzar made Tzidkiyahu take an oath. So you see the word Allah is an oath, and Moshe Rabbeinu took an oath, and that was to stay there with his shver, and therefore you had to be matir the neder b'fanav in front of Yisrael. Now, some have the girsa, the Bach adds on the word uksiv, and it says in the pasuk, once we bring in this story of Nebuchadnezzar and Tzidkiyahu to show that Allah means an oath, this is also related to the same idea as the Gemara has this whole narrative regarding that you could only matter a neder b'fanav. It says in the pasuk in Divrei Yom Beis, "V'gam b'melech Nebuchadnezzar morad," that Tzidkiyahu HaMelech also. Which one? Yeah, but it's still. Yeah, I'm saying it's still. Meshemtzach, the Shver, he gave him his daughter, Geras Hanadin, he says, I'm leaving, I'm being mad to the Neder. Yeah. I hear, the Baruch Hashem is telling him, I hear. So, it says in the pasuk in Daf Yomi Beis, "V'gam b'melech Nebuchadnezzar morad." That also Tzidkiyahu HaMelech rebelled against the king Nebuchadnezzar. Asher ishbiya belikim. That he made him take an oath in the God. Now, it says in Maimar Dusi, what was the rebellion of Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, the Jewish king, against Nebuchadnezzar, who was conquering the world? Ashkichet Tzidkiyahu Nebuchadnezzar. What happened was Tzidkiyahu HaMelech encountered the Nebuchadnezzar. He was eating a live rabbit. So, sometimes we do things in private that we're a little embarrassed from, even though we're the big king. Amalei says to him, Ishtabeli, swear to me, you're not going to reveal what you saw. I don't want the word to get out that I do such a thing. Ishtabei, so he swore to him. At the end, Tzidkiyahu was in so much pain in himself. Yeah, a good piece of juicy thing about the Nebuchadnezzar. So Itchel Shvuasei. He went to the Rabbanan, and he was shoyel. He asked to undo, to be matter his oath. V'amar, and he said, and he told people about what he saw. Shema Nebuchadnezzar, the Kumavazan. So Nebuchadnezzar heard that on the blogs, it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it and embarrassing him that this is what Nebuchadnezzar does. Shalach v'ayis Sanhedrin b'Tzidkiyahu. So he sent and he brought the Sanhedrin and Tzidkiyahu HaMelech. Amalahain, he said to them, Chazitu ma'kav avet Tzidkiyahu. Do you see what your king did? Didn't he swear in the name of heaven, in his God, that he's not going to reveal this secret that he saw me eating the live rabbit? So the Sanhedrin said to Nebuchadnezzar, he was shoyel on the shvur, this halacha, that you could make a request to undo the oath, and that's what he did. So Amalaho, he said to them, you could undo it, you could be shoyel on the oath? Amalayin, they say yes. But Amalahu, he said to them, the fun of? Is that only in front of the person that you took the oath on? Or was it even when that person is not there? They said to him, if it's only in front of him. Again, like we said, for one of the two reasons, either like we see chashad that he was chayshadim, or because of busha, because of I'm being mad to this and this and that, he'll flip out. So he said to them, so what did you do? You're telling me it could only be befun of, and you, my time Tzidkiyahu, why didn't you tell Tzidkiyahu that you cannot be shel in your shvuah when you're doing it shalai b'fanav of Nebuchadnezzar? Miyad, right away, like the pasuk says in Eicha, he said to them, Yeshvu la'aretz, sit on the ground, Yidmu, be silent, Ziknim b'tzion, the elders of Tzion, look what your mistake you made, that you allowed him to be mad to the neder, shalai b'fanav. Rabbi Yitzchak says, as the Girsa is, Malamed, this comes to teach, Shashamatu karam mitachteim. He removed the cushions from beneath them. The sages usually sit on top of a cushion. You remove them, sit on the floor. It's disgraceful of what you paskin. Now, the Ran says that where the neder was befanav, and it was balkarcha shel chaveira, it wasn't something that the person wanted. So let's say he says pashid that you can be matter a neder that's not lahana of yichaver, you could be matter that. But he says a neder that's for the hana, like these stories that we bring with Yisro and Nebuchadnezzar, for sure you cannot be matter only if it's midaitoi with that person's consciousness. That's how Rabbeinu Tam writes. He says, however, where you are matter it shaloi midaitoi, without the person's consciousness, without the person's willingness, is the neder ultimately permitted or not? He says tzarchiyan. Why? He brings the Gemara in Gittin, Perek HaShaleach, where it sounds like that the b'di'evet the neder would be permitted. Why? Because the Gemara says over there in Gittin Daf Lamed Hey, where Rabbi Gamliel was masakin that a woman has to take a neder to the Yisayimim when her husband dies. So he says, we didn't learn this only if she didn't get married. The Gemara asks that we should be concerned that maybe she went to a chacham and she was mad to her neder. And that's what the Gemara says over there. It says the Ran, if b'di'evet you tell me it's not effective, so even if she went to the chacham, what is it? Because a neder of the amana is for the hana of the Yisayimim. So obviously he says that even lahana is chaveiroi, whenever you mattered, b'di'evet it's going to be mutter, and that's what the Gemara's question was over there. Says the Ran, same thing over here. From the fact that the Sanhedrin permitted to Tzidkiyahu, if even b'di'evet it wouldn't be permitted, then how could Tzidkiyahu have revealed this? Obviously, it sounds like b'di'evet, although you're only supposed to be matter, b'fanav, it sounds like b'di'evet, if you were mattered, shaloi b'fanav, it's going to be permitted. But he says, but still there's a difficulty, because even if b'di'evet it's going to be permitted, but like it's chil, it's aser. So how did the Sanhedrin go permitted b'tzidkiyo? I thought the halach is like Nebuchadnezzar said to them in the story, it has to be b'fanav. How they matter shalei b'fanav? Says the Ran, you could say that for dvar mitzvah you would be matter. And Tzidkiyo was in very much pain when he couldn't reveal this secret, and through that he was being bottled from Alecha Shemaim. He wasn't able to do his avodah. Moreover, when the king commands something, it's a mitzvah for them to do. So therefore, that's why they were matter it shalei b'fanav. That's how he brings from Taisus. What? Oh, so yeah, that's in 1 second. Oh, well, that's Nebuchadnezzar put them on the floor. He's still upset. Doesn't mean that that's necessarily the halacha. Now, however, says around, it sounds like okay, but the evidence going to be mutter, because if not, then what would be effective? It says what they permitted for him, as is obvious from the Gemara Masechet is getting. But he says others want to say that these are not rayas, these are not good proofs, because the truth is even with the evidence not mutter, because the pasuk screams at Tzidkiyahu, and you see the punishment that he got. Like it says, "V'gam Melech Nebuchadnezzar morad." The pasuk testifies that he rebelled. Asher shbi b'lehim, and that's how the Ravid writes. And he says, and look what happened to him and the Sanhedrin. And he says, what do you do with the Gemara and Gittin? He says, it's not a raya. Because Neda Amona, since she made a neder to the Yisayim, he says actually what type of ta'elis is there by the Tinaikis, by the Issa B'Peir, saying it's not Lahanasam. And also, he says what the Gemara really means to say is that maybe she's going to go to Chacham and permit it, and she's going to think she's permitted. So, Al Kaponim, it's a machlekes regarding B'di'evet and how to learn, were they in the right, were they in the wrong. The Sanhedrin Tzidkiyahu seems to be a machlekes Rishonim regarding what the halacha is going to be B'di'evet after the fact, and therefore would we be matter b'malka mitzvah like Tzidkiyahu Pashat in this os halten.
What about it? But Tzidkiyahu, he had no choice. It was not only Baal Koch, he feared that something would happen to him. He really doesn't want to do the neder. We learned that if somebody comes from the government to take your money away, you lie, it's okay. It's not considered a neder because you're doing it. I have no choice.
I mean, you're saying that he didn't have a choice.
He didn't want to do the neder. Obviously, he didn't want to do the neder.
It doesn't say necessarily obvious. It says later on that he had this l'soif havakum star.
Okay.
Sounds like in the beginning he was like, okay, I won't say, and then at the end he was in so much pain that he's like, I have to sell somebody, over here, and then telephone. Once you tell one person, such a juicy piece, it gets out. Al Kapan we see machlekes Rishonim regarding the b'di'evet. Now the next Mishnah, continue on this theme of we said in the previous Mishnah regarding the machlekes of Noilid. Our Mishnah is going to discuss something in the middle, something that we call it's like Noilid, but it's not Noilid, and we have machlekes in that case too. So Rameir says like this: it says Yesh Dvarim, there are certain things shein kin Noilid. It's in a way it's like Noilid, but ve'ein kin Noilid, but it's not like Noilid, as we'll see, because he's really making his neder dependent on a variable, and if that variable is not there, essentially that's not really what he had in mind. So it's not really like Noilid. But Chum don't agree to him, and they say no, it's going to be even like Noilid, and therefore it's not going to be valid according to those opinions. The whole Noilid is not valid. Says the Mishnah case. What's such a case? So as follows: I'm a kohenim. He says, I take a neder. Shani Noises plainness. I'm vowing that I'm not going to marry that woman. You know why? Shavira. It's such a terrible father. Okay, so since he said because the father is bad, it sounds like only as long as the father is bad. So therefore, if Amrullah, they told him, what do you mean? Mace. He's dead. Like so says tshuva, or he repented. He's about tshuva. He's not a wicked person. That's one case. Or let's say he says, he says, I'm taking neder, I'm never entering to this house. You know why? There's such a wicked dog inside over there. I fear for my life to go into that house. There's snakes running around that house. I'm going to tell him, hello, Mesa Keleb, the dog is dead. Or the snake was killed. Okay, so this says the Mishnah, in a way, it's like Noilid, as we'll explain in the Gemara, but it's not really like Noilid, and therefore it may hold it's going to be permitted. But Chum do not agree to him, and they hold no, it's considered like a halacha of Noilid, and just like we disagreed in the previous Mishnah on Rabbi Eliezer of Noilid, we disagree on this case too. So the Gemara explains, we said in the Mishnah, and the Girsa should be Koinim Sha'ani Noise Plainis, that first case. I'm taking neder that I'm not going to marry that woman because her father is terrible. And then he's told that, what do you mean, the father is dead, b'chulu, etc. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Why are you telling me this is considered noilid ve'ena noilid? What do you mean, mace noilid who? Telling me that he's dead It's something that developed later point in time. So why is this like Rameir saying it's not really Nailid and therefore it's going to be permitted? It's a bona fide Nailid. So Mavundi says no. Nasa ketoila nidra bedavar. It's like as if he's making his neder contingent on something, like we explained in the Mishnah. The reason why it's permitted, even without being shown by the Chacham, is because he's saying that the reason why I'm saying it's forbidden is only because of this. If it's something he took a neder blank, and then something develops later on, like it's a person dying, so you say, okay, look, I know the things change right now, but that's a nailed. Here he said it's because of, it's like considered like a tanai. He says, I'm not marrying this girl because she's got a wicked father. So that's not like, oh, when he dies now, it's things develop later on that you didn't know about. No, that was my condition. If he's dead now, even though it's like Nailid, because developed later on, but it's not like really like Nailid, because my whole thing was because of that. If this is not here, so then that's not a problem anymore. So therefore that's not going to be a neder, and therefore then you could marry her. That's what the Gemara answers. That's one approach. Rabbi Yochanan says a different approach. He says, no, it doesn't mean when he was told that he died, it doesn't mean that he died subsequently. It means kvar meis ukvaras the tshuva karmele. What they told him was, in other words, he had died before you made the neder. And therefore that's considered like a neder toos, like a mistaken neder, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Which the Ran says, Sarachin, according to Rabbi Yochanan, how could you say there are things that are like Nailid, but they're not Nailid? What do you mean? If you tell me that he's already dead, so it's not similar to Nailid at all. That's the Ran's kasha. Now the Maisa Taisis, the bottom lines of Taisis says, I'll explain to you what Rameir is saying. There are certain things that are similar to Nailid, meaning that it appears as if he died after the neder. Exactly, because he can make a mistake. Even so, we're not concerned. But the Chum say it's going to be aser. Why? Because we're concerned, maybe we're going to confuse when he dies after the neder to when he really died before the neder. And those are the other case when they say aser tshuva, that we're going to make we're concerned that when he's not going to do tshuva, so or didn't do tshuva. So therefore, because of confusion, we say, okay, it's like Nailid, we're going to say it's going to be problematic to be matir neder that way. But that's Rabbi Yochanan's approach, that it's not a Nailid at all. It's actually that he already did tshuva. Now, actually, as the Gemara continues on the base, the Gemara asks, Masar Rabba, the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yochanan from a Mishnah on the Nedarim Daf, the Samach Vav Meral. The Mishnah says, Koinim she'eni noisel leplainis. I'm taking a neder that I'm not going to marry that woman because she's ku'ura, because she's ugly. But then, actually, it turns out no, she's actually beautiful. Or let's say Shchayr says, what do you mean, she's dark. Varei Levon actually turns out that she's white. Ketzacha says, what do you mean, she's short. Varei Arucha turns out she's actually tall. So it says the Mishnah on the next daf, Mutaba, so he'll be permitted to marry this woman, because, as the Mishnah explains, not because she's ugly and she became beautiful, or she was dark skinned, she became white, or she was short and then she became tall. No, it was a mistake in neder. You thought, you heard the shidduch information, and you thought that you knew who this girl was, and you said, neder, I'm never marrying this Miriam Mananowitz. You know what I'm saying? And turns out that's not who you thought it was. She's not the way you thought, so it's another ties. So that's the next Mishnah. But the Gemara says, wait a second, we have two opinions in our Mishnah. Bishlam runs in according to Rabbi that he says, our Mishnah's halacha was that the reason why it's unique halacha, that you can be matir neder, is because it's not really that it develops later on, meaning he holds that it actually happened that the guy died later on, did tshuva later on. So why is that not noiled? It says, no, because you said it's because the father's bad. So if it turns out he does tshuva even later on, that's like a tanai. A tanai, obviously, you would not be forbidden in your neder. You say, as long as he's a wicked person, does tshuva or dies, he's not a wicked person anymore. So I understand, says the Gemara, Tana, oh, very good. We have two Mishnayos. Our Mishnah is Taylor Nidra B'Dava, that you're making it dependent on something which is the Reisha. Our Mishnah, which is because when our father's bad. But Tanya, we learned in the next Mishnah, on the next Daf, a different halacha of Neder Tois, which is the Sefer, which is a case of that you took a neder that she's ugly. It turns out that she's beautiful. So those are two different halachas. We understand what was the necessity of the two Mishnayos. Now, the Ran just points out he says that why doesn't the Sefer say by ugly that she became beautiful? As some Gersois add on to the Ran, that it would also be Toila Nidra Bedavar, that as long as she's ugly, and when she becomes beautiful, will be permitted, just like we say by Aviyah Ra. In other words, to the contrary, we're saying that in such a situation, it would be Aser, because the Mishnah's words over there are not because she's ugly and she becomes beautiful. No, sounds like that wouldn't work. It's only because she was always beautiful. So it was Neder Tois. Frektaran, why? Why does that Mishnah say that? Why is it different in the case of her father being bad? You tell me if he ends up doing tshuva, so this woman goes and does reconstructive surgery, and she was ugly and now she comes all dressed up in this, this new fashion, whatever. So why is that Mishnah saying? Not because. Why not? Why can't you have the same halacha in our Mishnah as that Mishnah? So he says very important, he says, the reason is because when someone's bad, it's also lasses tshuva. It makes sense. People have a change of heart, people get inspired, and it also happens that he's going to die. So therefore, we're evaluating the guy's neder, that when he said, I'm not marrying this girl because she's got a terrible father, he meant as long as the terrible father is there. Whereas by an ugly woman, these are the words of the Ran, maybe today's time it's changed, he says, She'ena suya li isna. It's not the way for her to suddenly become beautiful. So therefore, that was not his intention that she should be permitted him when she's going to be beautiful. That's what he quotes from the Rashba. That's why we said not because she was ugly and became beautiful. Because no, that actually would not be valid. We would not make such a tanai. We wouldn't be oimen daitoi. Because she was always beautiful. That's why it's an editoy. That's why it's permitted. Another approach he says is that if he would have said the words, and you see the words are always important. Had he said the words, Sha'ani noise isha plains, I'm taking a neder that I'm not going to marry that woman. Shehi ka'ura, that she is ugly, and it would have been the same words like we say in the Reisha, she'aviyah ra, because her father is bad, says the Ran, yes. That would have sounded like, as long as she's ugly. And we would have made the same dig, and we would have said that it's the same t'nai, ketoila nidra, bedavar acher. They would have said, yeah, only as long as she's ugly. The moment she goes for some type of a beautification process, then she would be permitted. But here, since he said that I'm not marrying that woman that's ugly, it doesn't sound like Ketoila Nidja B'Davar. That he says from the Chacham Abasik B'Shmuel Ben Chacham Agor Rabbi Yehuda Bar Chezdoi. The wording is different, as we'll see on the next daf. It's not Sheh Hi Ku'ura. It's Ku'ura, the ugly woman. It's not Shehi Ku'ura. It's not as long as she's ugly. And that difference of wording would be the indicator and the deciding factor regarding if we would say this idea of Ketoila Nidja B'Davar, and that's why it's different. But Al-Kabam, the Gemara says, this all makes sense according to Rav Huna, that we have two Mishnayos. Our Mishnah of what's called Kinoyle Ve'ena Noyled, and then next Mishnah, which is a different halacha of Neder Tois. Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rabbi Yechanan, that he said that our Mishnah is talking about Kvar Meis, Ukvar S'Tshuva. We're talking about that he was told that, this guy, you said that you heard this terrible reputation about her father, you're never dating this girl ever again, you took a neder because you have 40 shatchanim who read you the same girl. No, the guy already is dead. He already did tshuva before you even took the neder. So then the question is, why do you need two mishnayos to say the same halacha of a neder tois when it was a mistaken neder? That's what the next mishnah on the next daf is going to tell us regarding where you took a neder and because she's ugly, you said, I'm never dating this girl. You saw the wrong picture. It wasn't the right girl. So that's our mishnah of neder tois. He's dead already. He already did tshuva. So the Gemara Kasha is definitely difficult. According to Rabbi Yechanan, why would the two Mishnayos are saying the same halacha? According to Rabbi Yechanan, there's two different halachas. According to Rabbi Yechanan, that would be difficult because there seems to be the same halacha. The halacha, the next Mishnah, again, va'oidam Remeir. Another thing Remeir says is a va'oid, the kula, another leniency that he says. We said one of regarding this kinoyled ve'ena noyled he was makel, that it's not considered noyled. And now another leniency he says regarding the halachas of hataras nadarim. You could open up for to undo the neder from someone that's written in the Torah. Now, someone had asked yesterday after the shir, it says, although the Gemara tells us on Daf Yomi that you cannot make a Pesach in what's called Yesh Boite Kemat Karas Charav, that someone who takes a neder is going to get pierced with the sword, like Shmuel who says whoever takes a neder, even though he fulfills it, is called a wicked person, or like Reb Nosson that he says kol hanodik ila bon the bama, and we cannot use that as a Pesach to tell the person because the guy's going to be intimidated, and of course he's going to say, I would never have took a such a neder. So why are we saying that you could open up with what's written in the Torah? So the Ran says there is different because his words are that's iyumim gedolim. That's incredible intimidation for the person. And even if he had taken the neder with that intention, he would be embarrassed to say that. Yeah, you would take a neder if it says kila bon the bama, like you're building a private altar, doing a avodah zarah. So it comes out that his nedarim are not going to be really permitted so well. You cannot use those psukim as psachim. But these of our Mishnah, that are not so severe to people. He says, yeah, I would have taken the neder even though it's this pasuk or that pasuk, because that's not such a severe type of intimidation, and therefore you could use them as a Pesach saying, had you known, because the guy would be honest. And he says, if he says, no, I wouldn't have taken it, it would be matter. If he says, yeah, I still would have, okay, then we won't be matter. But the guy would be honest, and he wouldn't say, oh, no, I would never, unless he actually means it, because he wouldn't be so afraid to say, no, I would have still taken it. So, but we tell him as follows, Ilo yisu yedea, had you known, you're going to violate on one of these many different lavim in the Torah. Aloi sakum, of not to take revenge. Valoi siter, not to hold a grudge. For example, like the Rosh says, let's say took a neder, not to lend his vessels to his neighbor because he didn't lend it to him. Which these psukim, the Gemara darshans in Yomei Daf Gimel regarding borrowing vessels. So he didn't lend me his snowplow. I'm not going to give him, my shovel. Or valoi sisna sechichel b'vevecha. Did you realize that you're going to violate not to hate your brother in your heart? Or to love your friend as yourself? Where let's say he took a neder not to inquire how the guy's doing. He says, I'm not going to check up on him. You realize you're violating It's the mitzvah of helping your relatives, that you should support your brother with you. Shu ani, that he's a poor person. Now that you took a neder, you cannot support him. You swore off this guy of ever helping him. Do you realize you're going to violate this law? If he says, had I known it's going to be like this, I would never take a neder. Then Hariz a mutter, that's going to be permitted. That is a valid way of being mater on neder. So Amalei Rav Huna bar Rav Katina Rabbanan, he says, wait a second. How could you say in the Mishnah that you're going to open up a Pesach that may be the subject of the vow, who he took a neder prohibiting benefit from, is going to become poor, and then you're not going to be able to provide for him, and you're telling me that this is considered, like the Mishnah called it, min hakasav b'Torah, what's written in the Torah? What do you mean? It sounds like that this relative is obligated to help him. Why? Says the Gemara, Nema, why can't the one who took the neder say, Kol dema'ani, whoever becomes poor, lava lai nafel, doesn't fall on me that I have to support him myself. What do you mean? What I could help out to support him, I'm with everyone else to be able to support him. So what is the Gemara? What's Rav Huna's question? The question is, so therefore he should be allowed to support that person, even though he had made his nechasim forbidden on that person. Why? Because he's not going to give it directly to that person. He's going to give it to the gabbai. He's going to give it to the shul, collection. And since if the gabbai wants to give it to that other person, he would be allowed to, so that would be permitted. Because that's actually what we learned in the Mishnah of Memches Amid Aleph. We said if, let's say, a guy is prohibited from a neder from having benefit from him, don't worry, you give it to someone else as a matana, and then that other person could get it from him. So therefore, the Gemara's question is, why is this a valid Pesach to say, oh, you didn't really mean this neder? Why didn't I mean this neder? Because you realize that guy, that if you can't support him right now, and if he's going to become poor, he's going to need someone to help him out, and you're not going to be able to help him, and therefore you're violating v'chayachicha imach. So what do you mean? Why am I violating v'chayachicha imach? What do you mean? I don't have to give it straight to him. I'm not the sole provider for him. I'll give it to the shul collection like everyone else, and then the shul will let to give it to him. So why am I violating? Why are you telling me that this is a mitzvah that I'm violating, that you could use it as a way of being poiseach my neder, not benefiting this person? Of what we said on the other daf, that becoming poor is not considered a nailut. It's a dove, says the Ran, matzah, that people lose their money. No, Misa, the Gemara says, is Noilid. That's something that develops later on. But Aniyas is Motzei. That's something that could happen. Mamish, it happens very quickly sometimes. So on that Amr Loi, the Rabban answered to Rav Huna, Rav Katina, Ani Omer, I say, Kol HaNeifel, whoever falls, Ein HaNeifel Yad Gabat Chila. It doesn't first fall to the community chest and collectors. Rather, he first asks from his relatives and from his close people. That moment, when you took a neder prohibiting this friend of yours, this relative of yours, and you're not going to be able to give him because you took a neder, that moment you're going to be violating the pasuk of Achai Ochicha Imach, and therefore that would be valid for a way of being mat to the neder, because, although you technically could give to the community organization, to the discretionary fund, but that's later on. He first comes to people that are his relatives, and you can't give them. That moment you violate Achai Ochicha Imach, and therefore that's a valid Pesach for the neder. Continue on this theme regarding being Pesach, being matter neder, says the Mishnah. You could open up for a person with his wife's ksuba. In other words, we tell him, wait a second, had you known that you're going to have to pay up her ksuba, her marital dowry, would you have made such a neder? If he says, no, I didn't realize that, so then we're matter the neder. And actually the Mishnah brings a story. A story with an individual, he took a neder prohibiting from his wife benefit. Her ksuba was 400 dinar. Now, Abba from Rabbi Kiva came in front of Rabbi Kiva, and he obligated him to give her ksuba. Amalei said to him, Rebbe, my teacher, my father left over in his estate 800 dinarim. Notel achi, I have one brother, he took dal meis, he took one half, which is 400. Mani dal meis, and I took the other 400. Loi daya, isn't it enough? Shetitel himasam and himasam? Isn't it enough that at least I'll split what I have from my share of the estate with my wife? Let her take 200, I take 200. Rabbi Kiva told him, even if you're going to sell the hair on your head, at the nice like ksuba, you have to give her entire ksuba of 400 dinar. Amalai said to him, had I known that this is going to be the case, then I'm going to have to give everything I have in my estate to my wife for a ksuba. Lo yisinai, I would never have taken a neder, which is going to force me to divorce her because of the neder that he took, which he can't have any benefit from her, and therefore it's his fault. Ve'tira Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Kiva was matir the neder, as we see, you can be matir b'ksubas ishtai. Now the Gemara asks, parenthetical, mitaltli mi mishtabdi l'ksubasa, is movable items that there's a lien on them for har ksuba, which is a machlekes remain rabbanim ksubas that pay alvim and beis. Here it sounds like that metaltalin, which is the money, is mishubatar ksuba, that he has to give her the money. Some Abai says no, it wasn't actually cash that he had. Karka shaba chesmeis dinner. He had property that the father left over, which was worth 800 dinner. One son took 400, this son took 400, and that's the karka that we said that's meshubah to the ksuba of the wife that Rabbi Kiva said he has to give to her. But says the Gemara, wait a second, the words Rabbi Kiva told him were sa roishai. He even has to sell the hair on his head. But sa roishai metatlihu, the hair on his head, that's definitely a movable item. And so Rabbi Kiva said to him, he has to sell that to pay up his wife's ksuba. Says Gemara Nahachim, and this is what he told him. Even if you have to sell the hair on your head to be able to eat, still she's going to be able to collect all the karka, even though you're going to be left with nothing. Rather, what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to go to the barber shop to sell your hair so that someone could have a sheitel and to be able to eat. Even so, you're going to have to sell everything because of your responsibility of paying up your ksuba. So the Gemara says, wait a second, if that's the case, Shamim Mino, what we could infer from this is Ein Masadin L'Bal Chayv. Then obviously, we don't organize the needs of a debtor, which is a machlekes in Bam Metzid of Kovidal Manalv. There is a Man Amr who says that we leave over for the debtor a bed, a mat, his tools that he needs for his trade, and food for 12 months. Why would we say that? He's a debtor. Because we learn out the little word of mach, micha, of being poor, from the same word that it says by the parish of Erichim. But there is a mandama that says, no, we don't organize, we don't leave him anything. Says the Gemara, from the fact that we're saying over here, that even if you have to sell the hair on your head, obviously that would not masader, because he's leaving him nothing. He can't even go buy himself a bagel and cream cheese. He's got to go take a snip and sell his hair, or people like sell their blood, just to be able to afford some orange juice. It sounds like he's not masader, l'bal chayv. On that, the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, no. Could be that you are Mesader. But what Rabbi Kiva was telling him was, as he continued top of Samach Vav Amud Aleph, Loimer, to say that even if you want to do Lifnei Mishuras Adin, and you don't want this halach of Siddur, you don't want to say, I'm not going to pay up because I need my basic needs being taken care of, don't think that you're going to be exempt from the excess. In other words, she'ein mekaden shtar ksuba, we don't tear up the document of the ksuba. Why not? I have nothing more to pay. Because if you end up getting more money at a later point in time, then she'll be able to collect the rest. And that's the chiddush. Although we learned the Mishnah Masechet Erechin that says that if, let's say, a guy is very poor and he has an erech vow, if he gives a selah because he can't afford the whole erech vow that he took, and he subsequently becomes wealthy, he doesn't have to pay the rest. So that's what the Gemara is telling us. We only learn that from the laws of Erechin regarding this halacha of siddur, of being masada, of providing for the basic needs of the person who's the debtor. But that's only regarding siddur. Regarding hesed yad, which means that how much you could afford, that we don't learn that from Erechin. And therefore, what Kiva was telling him was I don't care what you do if you sell the hair on your head. You're not saying that I have no more, and therefore that's all you have to pay, and then you're off the hook. That we don't learn from Erechin. That okay, you don't have right now, but in a few years from now, when you finally make it big, then you'll have to pay up the rest of the ksuba. One secondary point that the Ran ends off with, he says, from the fact that our Gemara is saying over here, Shamit, we know what we can learn from this, is that metatli amashtabli ksuba. The Gemara originally entertained to say, oh, we see that movable items, we thought that it was cash that he had, and that it's meshubah to the ksuba. So we learn from this that according to us, that we rule, as the Gemara elsewhere says in ksubas, that metatli are not mishtabed liksuba. No, it's not true. A woman ksuba, she cannot. There's no lien on movable items. It sounds like that even from him himself, not just metatli that was sold off, even from him itself is not meshubed. And the reason is, and that's what it sounds like over here, because here we're talking about what are we inferring metat mishtabed liksuba? It was his metatli, it was his monies, and still say, oh, you can infer metat mishtabed liksuba. What do you mean metatli? It's his, yeah. But and therefore, if you hold it's not mishtabi, that means to say even by him. So what's the reason why his money is not meshubah to ksuba? Says the Ran, the reason is because, first of all, you don't know the time of the ksuba. You don't know when she's going to collect with it. And maybe she's never going to collect with it at all. She might die first, they might never get divorced. And when she collects, she's only going to collect only if he dies or if she gets divorced. So therefore she's not what's called semech das, she's not so confident that she'll get this, only with property. Real estate is one thing you're confident. You know, everyone says buy real estate, you know it's there. You know, that's the only way that her ksuba is meshubit is on karka. And therefore, according to the Rabbanan, her power with ksuba is weaker than a regular debt. Meaning, although generally metatl diasmi are not meshubit to b'chayiv, the movable items of orphans are not meshubit to a creditor, but when you do collect, you could collect from the guy himself, even the shirt on his back, even though that's metatli. And whereas over here, she can't even collect from the shirt on his back because she cannot collect his metatli. So it's weaker than a regular balchayv, like we're saying, because Meister, she doesn't know if she'll ever collect it even at all. But according to Reb Meir, no, it's stronger by ksuba than a regular creditor. Because although metatli diasmi is not meshubid to a balchayv, for ksuba, it is meshubid according to Reb Meir, and therefore that would be their machlekes that they have regarding this halacha of metatli as applies to ksuba, taken to any time.